Iowa board is trying to keep a proposed pipeline far away from homes, schools, and other areas, but a judge's ruling dealt it a serious blow.
New tonight, 6 News' Joe Harris shows us where the plan goes from here.
Developer Summit Carbon Solutions wants to build a carbon dioxide pipeline through Shelby County, Iowa. They say it would be critical to the ag economy and support the county through taxes.
Once the project is operational, we anticipate, and this was a study done by a third party, that Summit's project would provide about $870,000 in new property taxes every year to Shelby County.
The pipeline would carry liquid CO2 through Iowa and 4 other states, and delivering the liquid from ethanol plants to underground storage locations in North Dakota and Illinois. But the Shelby County Board of Supervisors passed its own ordinance in November, restricting how closely hazardous liquid pipelines can be to schools, homes, and public recreation areas. But last week, a federal judge ruled the ordinance conflicts with state and federal regulations. She granted Summit's request for a temporary injunction, preventing the ordinance's enforcement.
We're scheduled to have a trial because Summit had filed a lawsuit against the county of enforcing our ordinance. So that will not be enforced until a jury decides that. It's scheduled for January.
So at a meeting today, the Board of Supervisors provided an update on the situation to its residents and landowners. Many are worried the pipeline could rupture like it did in Satarsha, Mississippi in 2020. Around 45 people were hospitalized after being gassed in their homes and nearby vehicles. Summit says it's learned from that incident.
Where we have areas, around water crossings and things like that, we are looking at the topography. And in some cases, we may reroute around that topography that could cause a problem with the pipeline, or we are doing geotechnical surveys to ensure that the soil in those areas is strong enough to support the pipeline.
Federal regulators concluded the rain made the soil shift, causing the pipeline to break.
Well, I guess it never rains in Iowa, so we don't have to worry about that. I guess we don't have frost heave in the spring, so we don't have to worry about it coming up.
Kenkel says the county has 30 days to respond to the temporary injunction. Reporting in Shelby County, Iowa, Joe Harris, 6 News.
Summit Carbon Solutions doesn't have all the land it needs to build that pipeline through Shelby County, so we asked if they've submitted a petition to the Iowa Utilities Board to use eminent domain, and we're waiting to hear back.